Hey everybody, welcome back to Sweatpants BI. This is part 4, the last video of our toy company sales report full-length build. So far in the series of videos walking through this toy company sales report build, I've showed you how to model the data. We've talked about setting up our DAX measures. We've built our layouts. We've built a really, in my opinion, very attractive looking Power BI report build that has 3 pages of very good content for any kind of company that's looking at a robust year-to-date performance report. However, there's still one very important question that anybody in a business who's looking at our sales report is going to need answered. And that is, based on how we've performed so far this year, are we going to hit our sales target? So in this video, I'm just going to walk you through one more somewhat advanced application of DAX that is going to build on everything that we've done so far, but we're actually going to take our year-to-date sales performance and we're going to come up with just, a hypothetical sales target, and we're going to use our year-to-date performance to try to project out, whether or not it looks like we're going to hit whatever threshold we've set for 2023 revenue. So let's go ahead and hop back into this somewhat more advanced, I would say, icing on the cake for this Power BI report build that's going to take this report from being a very attractive, kind of descriptive sales report into something that's a little bit more actionable, something that's a little bit more useful to anybody from the business that wants to know how is 2023 possibly going to end for us. So in this video, we're going to try to address the important question that really isn't answered on the first page of our sales report, and that is, are we going to hit this $8.5 million goal? And of course, we're forecasting, we're trying to predict into the future. It's there's only so much that we can really do. We're not aiming for perfect. We're not going to be able to make a perfect prediction, but there is information that we have at our disposal that we can use to try to project rather than forecast whether or not we're on pace to hit the goal. And sometimes you might hear this referred to as a run rate. What we're going to do is we're going to look at, on average, how much we've sold each day in 2023. And we're just going to try to multiply that times the remaining days in the year to figure out whether or not, our the rate at which we've performed so far in 2023 is enough to carry us past this $8.5 million threshold. So instead of trying to bake that into this first page, I'm just going to go ahead and add a new page to our report here. And I'm going to call this goal projection. And we're going to make some changes behind the scenes real quickly. One thing we're going to do is we're going to add, we're going to move this sales data cap up here to filters on this page, because now that we're projecting into the future, we can't limit the entire report to only showing us what has happened as of the last day of sales data. So let's just go ahead and very quickly remove filters on all pages. Let's go ahead and head to our date table and grab our sales data cap. And we're going to institute this at the page level instead of at the report level. So let's just go ahead and grab it for every other page in our report. Okay, now we're good. Okay, and let's go ahead very quickly and just create yet another background. We're just going to copy and paste, keep the source formatting, and we're going to change this page to goal projection. And I'm going to save this as a copy. I'm going to save it as a SVG, or scalable vector graphics format. Going to save it to the folder location where my other backgrounds are saved. This is going to be background 4. Let's go ahead and bring this into the background here. Set our transparency to 0. And this is where we're going to create a very, very quick and dirty goal projection to try to help us visualize where we're going to end up in 2023. Now, anytime we're doing, more complex DAX calculations that require a whole bunch of measures and, different logic in order to build the eventual, line chart that we're ultimately aiming for here, I would highly suggest that you try to get all the calculations working in the context of a table visual and then just use the same elements in whatever other visual you're trying to use later. It'll all work out. So first, let's go ahead and just to make our lives a little bit easier, let's go ahead and just filter this page to just look at 2023 or the current year, however you prefer to set up your date table. Some of my date tables that I use in my day job, I have an updating column that just as a flag 1 or 0 for the current year, and sometimes I would just use that instead of hard coding in 2023. But just for demonstration purposes, we're going to just add 2023 as a filter, and we're going to go ahead and grab our date column. I'm going to remove the date hierarchy, and I'm just going to add this here. And the first step in our goal projection quest here is we need to try to calculate a year-to-date average daily sales. Basically, as of September 30th, which is the last date in our sales table, we need to know how our year-to-date performance has been by, how much on average have we sold per day so far in 2023. The way that I do this, and first let's go ahead and set up a new measure table just to keep all of these measures all in one place, because this is going to be some of our more complicated DAX here. Let's wait for that table to come through. There it is. Our first measure is going to be to calculate how many days have passed year to date. So year to date day count, we're going to use our total year to date formula again. And we're going to count the number of days in our sales table. In other words, days that we actually sold something. And we're going to use our date column. I'm going to go ahead and hide column 1 in my measure table to turn that into a measures table. Let's go ahead and add this over here to our table that we have going here. And let's scroll all the way down because I really want you all to see what happens when we run out of dates in our sales date table. Notice, of course, that we're using the date column from our regular date table, but we're counting the total year-to-date dates from our sales table. So notice, we're counting dates from our sales table, we're using dates from our dates table. So basically, when we get to the point where we run out of dates in our sales table, that 273 just persists all the way down. That's totally fine. That's actually what we want for these purposes. Real quickly, just to save us some space, I'm going to go ahead and convert my date format to short date to save us a little bit of space over here. We're going to need everything so that I can kind of show you step by step how this is working. Next, we need to calculate the remaining days in 2023. So let's go ahead and add another measure. This measure is going to be remaining days. And for this, we're going to calculate total year-to-date. And instead of counting dates from our date table, we're going to count dates from our sales table, we're going to count the dates from our date table. And we're going to use the dates from our date table. So before I do anything else, let me just go ahead and show you what this looks like so far. You can see all of the numbers are pretty well identical until we get to September 30th. And then you can see on September 30th, my remaining days keeps going, whereas my year-to-date day count stays at 273. And of course, my remaining days runs all the way through to 365. But we're not done yet with our remaining days measure. What we're going to do is we're going to actually subtract our year-to-date day count from that so that we can come up with 92 days remaining. So on October 1st, we have 1 day, then 2 days, then 3 days, leading all the way up to 92 days remaining in the year. Now, you might be thinking, well, Sean, that's kind of unintuitive. Wouldn't we want October 1st to show 92 and then 91 and then 90 and then have December 31st show 0? And that would probably make more sense. But since we're projecting, this is exactly what we want right now. So we're going to leave it as is. And we're going to go ahead and real quickly just add our revenue over here, just so we're reminded of what our revenue was. I'm going to go ahead very quickly and just zero out the decimals there to save us some space. And let's go ahead and add our running total revenue here as well. So there you can see, we've got our running total revenue. And in order to get average daily revenue, well, we've actually already got everything that we need, right? Here's our running total revenue. Here's our running total days. So in order to get average daily revenue, or average daily sales, all we're going to do is just divide those two measures together. So average daily revenue equals, and we're going to use the divide function, but running total revenue divided by year-to-date day count. And you can see that, starts at 28,145, which is exactly the same as our revenue on the first day. On the second day, we sold a little bit less. That dropped our average daily revenue down to somewhere between 24,000 and 28,000. Revenue continued to drop. Our year-to-date revenue starts to drop. We had a really good January 5th. Our average daily revenue went back up again. So looks like this is working just fine. As of September 30th, 2023, our average daily revenue is 25,502. And this is the average daily revenue that we're going to use to project for the rest of the year, because this $25,502 is our running total revenue divided by the number of days that have elapsed in the year. So this $25,502 is the average daily revenue that encompasses our entire year so far. So what we're going to do real quickly is we're going to come up with a formula that's just going to grab this 25,502. And we will call this average daily revenue today. We're going to calculate this as average daily revenue. And we're going to filter our date table to where our dates equals the max sales date. Actually, I'm noticing that it doesn't look like it's performing exactly the way that it should be, and there's actually an easier way that I can calculate this. I'm just going to calculate the average daily revenue as I wrote it, but I'm going to calculate it for everything in the date table. Now I'm getting 25,502 for everything, which is exactly what I want. I want a column that just shows whatever the last value in my average daily revenue is, but it shows it for all dates, because Now I can use my remaining days, which goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and I can multiply these remaining days times my current average daily revenue to come up with basically a projected amount of revenue for the remainder of the year. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. We're going to call this remaining year forecast, and this is going to be our remaining days times our average daily revenue today. And you can see where remaining days is 0, my remaining year forecast is 0. And if I go ahead and turn off the decimal places here, it'll make it a little bit easier to read. But on October 1st, if I make another $25,502, that's a projection of $25,502. And every day for the remainder of the year, I'm just adding on another $25,502 for all of these remaining days. And so hopefully, I can go ahead and spot check this. And, my goal was $8.5 million. I'm going to go ahead and add this $6,962,074 to this $2.34 million, and I'll know right out of the gate. Looks like we're going to hit that $8.5 million the target that we had. So now let's go ahead and create a complete forecasted amount that also takes into account our running total, or how much revenue we've sold so far. And we're going to call this forecast, we're going to call this measure rather, running total plus forecast. And that is going to be our running total revenue plus our remaining year forecast. And now we have something that we can visualize that runs all the way from January 1st to where we think we're going to end up by the end of the year. And this is going to be much, much more exciting to visualize than what we have here, because we'll actually be able to show how we're tracking to hit that $8.5 million goal. So we've pretty well got everything that we need already set up. Now we just need to figure out a way to visualize this in a line chart that's going to help us really tell that story. So let's go ahead and grab our table here, and we're just going to shrink this down a little bit because we're going to use this space up here to create a big line chart, very similar to what we have here. And so I'm going to go ahead and just copy this over. I'm going to expand this to take up a lot more space here. And you can see, my total revenue, my running total revenue is acting exactly the way here that it is in my table, where basically once we get to September 30th, there's no new revenue coming in, so that $6.962 million just persists. I'm going to go ahead and drag my date column into the x-axis here, because that's what I based all of my formulas on. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my running total plus forecast to the chart here. And you can see it's now showing where I am expecting to hit that $8.5 million goal. But, because some of this is not actually, realized sales yet, might be very useful to sort of combine some of these measures together to create a more compelling, visual that sort of tells this story, more clearly. So let's go ahead and we're going to create another measure table here that is going to contain more of our forecast or projection measures that we're going to use in this line chart. I like to just create as many measure tables as I need to sort of keep all of my work organized. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to create a forecast, or let's call this projection minus year-to-date running total. And what we're going to do here is we're going to specify that if our running total revenue is not blank, meaning that we have revenue, that I want this formula to be blank. Otherwise, I want to use my running total plus forecast measure. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab this. I'm going to go ahead and hide my column 1 to make this measures 5 a measure table. I'm going to go ahead and just drop this into my line chart here. And I did realize that I made a mistake just now, and that is that I'm using my running total revenue, which is never blank in this particular visual. I need to just use my revenue measure. Now, notice that I'm only getting the part of my line chart, or the part of my running total plus forecast measure that runs from October to the end of the year. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my running total revenue measure again. I'm just going to add that back in. And you'll notice that now I've got separate lines for my running total revenue and just the forecast part, which is really what I want. However, I still have this kind of, unsightly looking line where basically my running total just keeps going even though no new revenue is coming in. So let's go ahead and create another measure that is, we're going to call this running total revenue stop. And this is going to look something like if revenue equals blank, then blank, otherwise use our running total revenue. Basically, if we're not making money, don't show me the running total revenue measure. When I drag that in here, you'll now notice, well, 1 second, I deleted the wrong thing. There we go. You'll now notice that my running total revenue stops where it should. It doesn't keep going, across these other months. It just leads seamlessly into my forecast, which is exactly what I wanted. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to add a couple of more measures so that I can clearly mark where we are today and where we're expecting to end up. So what we're going to do is we're just going to add a marker for this 9.3 million and another marker for the 6.9 million that we've actually made in revenue as of the end of our sales data set. So let's go ahead and just create a new measure here. And this new measure is going to be called current year-to-date revenue. And the logic for this is going to be if the given value or selected value being evaluated in this line chart equals, we're going to calculate the max sales date for all the dates that are in this line chart, then we're going to return our running total revenue. Otherwise, we're not going to return anything. So basically, as Power BI reads through all of the different dates in this line chart, we're telling it if the value that is selected is equal to the maximum sales date, then show running total revenue. Otherwise, don't show us anything. And so I'm going to go ahead and add this new measure here, and immediately you can see a little dot appears right here. That is exactly what we wanted to have happen, because we're going to be able to add a data label to this showing it as where we are today. Now we want to add another one over here to show the end of the year forecast. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a new measure. And we're going to use this to figure out which date the forecast ends on. I could have lumped all of this into one larger measure, but I really wanted to show you exactly how this is going to work. So I'm going to call this one max forecast date. And this measure is going to look something like this, where I'm basically calculating the maximum date across all of the dates that are in this visual. And for this, I'm going to just evaluate the maximum date from the date table. So it's kind of like a double max. Like first I'm calculating the maximum dates in the date table, and that's going to evaluate the same for every single date that's in this line chart. And then I'm telling Power BI, give me the maximum date that you found in the line chart. And this should, if we're lucky, return December 31st, 2023. I'm just going to go ahead and put my max forecast date into the tooltip here to make sure that it's working correctly. You can see as I move through it that my maximum forecast date stays at December 31st, 2023. So it's working great. And now, in order to grab the forecasted amount on this last date, we're going to calculate end of year forecast or projection, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to say if selected value, if the selected date in the line chart equals our max forecast date, then go ahead and show me the running total plus forecast. Otherwise, don't show me anything. And when we drop this in, we immediately see a little dot appear up here, which again is exactly what we want. We can go ahead and delete that now. And we can change this to take up as much of the screen as possible. Now we're going to want to go through and make sure that we give the items in our legend, easier to understand names. So I'm going to go ahead and just call my running total revenue stop running revenue total. I'm going to move this here, my current year-to-date revenue, and I'm just going to call this year-to-date revenue. I'm going to call this next measure remaining year projection. And I'm going to call this projected full year sales. So now we get the fun part of actually going through and reformatting all of this so that it looks great. Let's go ahead and head to our x-axis first. Let's go ahead and pump up the size of our x-axis values a little bit so that they're easier to read. Let's go ahead and head over to our legend, and we're going to, well, first we're going to go ahead and update our lines. That probably makes more sense first. So let's go ahead and head down to our running revenue total, and we're going to give this a kind of light teal color that we've been using. And we're going to pump up the stroke width just a little bit here. For our year-to-date revenue, since this is kind of an extension of our year-to-date performance, we are going to give it kind of a dark color as well, or kind of a darker version of that same revenue color that we were using. For our remaining year projection, if we want to, we can make this like kind of a blue, and we can change the stroke width just a little bit. But since this isn't real yet, this is just a projection, let's go ahead and change this from a solid line to a dotted line. Might even want to look at a dashed line, but I kind of like the dotted line more. And let's go ahead and make the color of our projected full year sales. Let's go ahead and make that blue as well. Now what we're going to do is we're going to head down to our markers, and it added markers to everything, which is of course not what we want. Let's go ahead and go down to running revenue total. We're going to turn off the markers there. Let's go to our remaining year projection, turn off the markers there. The only places where we want markers are on the year-to-date revenue and the projected full year sales, since basically all we can see is a marker. So for year-to-date revenue, I'm going to go ahead and increase the size of that dot since it's important. And I'm going to go ahead and change the color and make sure that it is that kind of dark teal. For projected full year sales, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pump up the size to about a 10. And if you want to give it, a slightly lighter color, that's looking pretty good to me. And now we're also seeing the markers appear up here where they should to sort of correspond with what we have here. Next, we're going to unleash havoc by turning on our data labels, which of course turns on data labels for everything. Fortunately, this is a pretty easy fix. Let's go ahead and, for our running revenue total, turn off our data labels. And for our remaining year projection, turn off our data labels. So this leaves us with what we're most interested in. For our year-to-date revenue, we can go ahead and show where we are today. Go ahead and bump that down. If you want to show everything, no problem. We definitely don't need the decimal places. And for our projected full year sales, we're going to do the same thing, except we're going to drop this down also to about 18. And we're going to show everything, but without decimal places. So there we go. So we now have a line chart here that really projects out our sales. And 1 second, I'm trying to talk while I'm also updating my legend to just be making the values here a little bit larger. But now we at least have a line chart that shows how sales are progressing this year, and based on our daily run rate, where we think we might end up. So let me go ahead and just give this a title of 23 projected revenue based on average. If you want to say year-to-date average daily revenue. In parentheses, we'll also put that we're comparing this against our goal. I am going to change my title here from projected full year sales to projected full year revenue, since using sales could be confusing considering I say revenue everywhere else. Okay, so now we're done with our projection. You might be curious, what else could we do to make this look pretty cool, or even cooler? So, one thing that we could do is, okay, so this projection tells us that it looks like we're going to beat that $8.5 million goal. What else, could we do to sort of give the user a little bit more control, maybe play with this information a little bit more? Well, maybe someone would like to say, okay, what if we change the goal? Can we just change the goal on the fly? Sure. This is also, when I've built things like this in the past, this is an opportunity to add some additional, features. Like maybe we want to add a numeric range, or like, an interactive goal that a user could change. So let's go ahead and add a numeric range. We're going to add a whole numbers here, and we're going to, add a 6 million as the minimum, and maybe we want the goal to go as high as 12 million. And maybe we want users to be able to toggle in increments of 500,000. So we can add a parameter here, and we can add a new measure here. actually, I'm going to back up a second. I forgot that when you create these goal-seeking parameters, they create a parameter measure for you. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to just change the location of this parameter measure to my measures 05 table. And I'm going to change this to interactive goal. And now I'm going to go up here to where I had added that y-axis constant line. And instead of using my goal measure, I'm going to point this instead at my interactive goal measure, so that now, if the user wants to kind of, move this goal line around, they can do that. It's very, very easy. And maybe we're also thinking, okay, we hope that we end up, continuing to sell the same average daily sales that we have so far, but maybe we don't have a lot of confidence that in Q4. Maybe we think that our average daily sales in Q4 are actually going to be less than they have been. So maybe we want to project the rest of the year based on lower average daily sales than using the 25,000 or whatever we had when we built this projection. So let's go ahead and add another numeric range, and let's go ahead and set the minimum value here at 5,000, and we'll set the maximum value here at 50,000. And we'll increase this in increments of 1,000. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to create another version of our forecast that allows us to sort of, play with what our projection might look like if we instead we're using our goal seek parameter here. So let's go through our measures here. We've got current year-to-date revenue. We don't need to touch that. We've got our end-of-year projection. We don't need to touch that. What we're interested in is going to be our, well, first of all, I'm in the wrong table, our average daily revenue here. So let's go ahead and grab our average daily revenue today and change that from today to projected. Or actually, let's change it to average daily revenue interactive. And instead of using this formula, which I'm actually just going to comment out in case I want to use it again later, I'm actually going to use my parameter to measure. And now this is going to cascade, of course, to everything else that I've made for my forecast here. But if I change this, notice how my projected forecast is now falling or increasing as I play with this parameter. So if we decided, you know what, 8.5 million doesn't make sense as a goal, we want to increase it to 9 million, and somebody says, well, basically how little can we sell and still hit that goal? We can sort of play with these values over here and goal seek so that we know about what we have to maintain in order to hit a progressively higher target. So let's go ahead and grab that parameter value measure here. Let's go ahead and add it up here to our measures 05 table. Looks like that triggered an error somewhere. I'm pretty sure I know why. There we go. And we're back up and running. Okay, so the last thing that we need to do now is we just need to finish our formatting and get everything on here that we would want for this goal projection page. So let's go ahead and head over to our general settings. Let's go ahead and add new background colors for these. That looks pretty fine to me. Just to keep everything, more or less equal with the other visuals that we have here. I'm going to kind of drag these over here. this first one, I'm going to change the label from parameter to, there we go. I'm going to shrink the font size down a little bit, but let's call this goal set. And I'm going to change my input value here, obviously so that it's easier to read. I'm going to use the same color for my slider here that I'm using in other places in the report. And I'm just going to copy these formatting settings over to this one. And I'm going to change the header of this other slicer to average daily sales set. Now, with the space that I have down here, it might be useful to just show the most important cards or most important measures that we're calculating in card form. We've got plenty of space here. I'm going to go ahead and make these cards just a little bit taller. Might have gone overboard just a little bit. I'm going to just grab everything here, go to Format. I'm going to distribute everything vertically so that I know that the distance between everything is perfect. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to grab our interactive goal and put that here. We're going to update this to show as a currency. We're going to show our forecast or our projected full year revenue. Here. So now we've got our interactive goal and our running total plus forecast. And in this card, we're going to have to calculate a new value, and that is our progress towards goal. Towards projected goal. And that is going to be running total plus forecast divided by interactive goal. We're going to change this to a percentage. Reduce this to 1 decimal place so that we can see that currently, based on the interactive goal that we've set and the average daily sales that we've set, it looks like we could hit, 106% of our target. If we drop this down to something like 26,000, looks like we're still good. If we drop it down to 25,000, still fine. But if we drop it down to something like 20,000, you'll see we're only hitting 97% of our target. Maybe you want to add even one more measure to draw some, attention to the fact that if average sales only reach $20,000, we could hit our goal. This is also a great place to add even some more conditional formatting. So let's create a conditional measure here for our card color. And the way that this is going to work is if our progress towards projected goal is greater than or equal to 1, then we're going to use one color. Otherwise, we're going to use another color. And because I don't know what these hex colors are off the top of my head, I'm going to go over here real quickly, and I'm just going to go to the background color of that card, and I'm going to grab this green color, and I'm going to add it to the first part of my conditional color formatting here. Then I'm going to change it to orange. And I'm going to grab this color and add it to the other part of my if clause. I'm going to go ahead and commit that. And then I'm going to add as the background color for this card, that card color measure that I created. So I'm going to change my format style to field value. I'm going to go ahead and drop down to my measures 05 table. I'm going to grab my card color, and now it's using the same logic here to calculate the background color. So if I calculate, my projection based on average daily sales set at $27,000, no problem, I'm good. However, if I fall below that threshold, you can see that now things are orange. This is a warning, that I really need to make sure that I do something to make sure that I actually hit the goal. Or, if I really wanted to, I could just lower the goal, I guess. But yeah, now we have, the most advanced but probably useful part to someone who's running a sales team in this goal projection tool. So I'm pretty happy about the sales report that we were able to generate from that data set. Hope you found it useful. You may just be trying to recreate my sales report, exactly as I built it if you're someone who's newer to Power BI. If you've been building Power BI for a little while and you're looking for a sales report, maybe you're just trying to use my ideas to build something else that's really cool and more unique to you with that sales data set. Whatever you choose to do, I hope that tutorial is going to help you on your Power BI journey. If you're just using it to try to spruce up your Power BI portfolio, I hope that you found that really useful. And if you're trying to organize your portfolio pieces towards landing a BI job, hope that this will be, maybe one step towards helping you build some really cool portfolio pieces. Thanks so much for checking out Sweatpants BI as always. I will see you in the next tutorial or maybe even another full Power BI walkthrough. Thanks.